Good afternoon. It is the appointed time and we have a quorum. Let's call the meeting to order. Thank you. Thank you. Information papers issued since last meeting, there were 2. And the details are set out in the revised agenda. Item 2, date of next meeting and items for discussion. The next meeting will be held on the 11th of June, Monday, 2:30 p.m. at room 3. The government has proposed 2 items for discussion. Progress report on Innovation and Technology Fund for Better Living and Digital Inclusion. Second, spectrum trading. If there is no objection or no other view, so these will be the 2 items for the next meeting. Item 3. Funding to Cyberport. So let's invite the administration team to join us first, and that is on funding to Cyberport, supporting the development of the startup ecosystem and promotion of e-sports development. I'd like to remind members this is about funding. So in accordance with ROP 83A and 84, the members, if you have a direct or indirect pecuniary interest in the matters to be discussed, please disclose the nature of that interest before you speak. And today, we have the Secretary for Innovation and Technology and his team members, and also from the GCIO, we have the Mr. Alan Young, and we have the team from the Hong Kong Cyberport Management Company Limited, Mr. Peter Yang, the new CEO. He is here for the first time. Welcome, you and your team. I'm not going to introduce them one by one, so I'll hand over the floor to the Secretary. Maybe you can brief us first, and then we will raise questions. Thank you, Secretary. Thank you, Chairman. This paper briefs the panel on the funding of $300 million to Cyberport proposed in the 18-19 budget. As Hong Kong's flagship institution in promoting ICT in Hong Kong, the Hong Kong Cyberport plays an important role over the years. The government would like to leverage on its experience and network in enhancing support for startups and implementing new measures. We would like to promote esports in Hong Kong as well. As such, we propose to provide financial support to the Cyberport to implement a number of support measures. And there will be new sectors to be further developed. Among the $300 million, we propose $100 million respectively to Cyberport to enhance support for existing initiatives and implement new support schemes for startups, respectively. In enhancing support for startups, $85 million will be used to increase the financial subsidy for startups under the Cyberport's incubation program from $330,000 to $500,000 each. In the next 5 years, a total of 500 startups will benefit. In addition, to tie in with the Tsinghua Smart Space Commissioning, we suggest expanding the coverage of the Cyberport Creative Micro Fund to the tenants of Tsinghua Smart Space. $50 million will be used for that, and the ceiling of $100,000 will be given for each applicant. And we also propose giving $50 million for Cyberport to roll out the Overseas Mainland Market Development Support Scheme, under which eligible startups who have completed the incubation program and the microfund program to expand overseas and the mainland. Our proposal is to provide a financial subsidy of up to $200,000 to each applicant to conduct market research and promotion, as well as participate in business missions, trade fairs, and exhibitions outside of Hong Kong. This program in the next 5 years will be able to help 250 startups. Moreover, we propose giving $50 million for the Cyberport to establish an easy lending scheme. Through rental concession, multinational corporations will be invited to station in Cyberport to set up offices and R&D units. We hope that these companies can become landmark or iconic enterprises in Cyberport and thus contribute to the Cyberport ecosystem in various aspects. In the next few years, 10 multinational corporations are expected to station in Cyberport. Now, with regard to promoting development of esports, $50 million will be used to provide venue for esports competition. There will be a dedicated venue to be set up. There will be dedicated and advanced lighting and audio systems to be set up. Apart from organizing competitions, the sectors can also use the venue and the facilities to arrange for related activities and conduct training. And for the other $50 million, it will be used to support development of esports technology, including organizing local and regional mega events. There will also be training programs and promotion activities. The Cyberport will further develop startups and nurturing talents and try to nurture talents and startups for esports. If members support these proposals, in the middle of this year, we will be submitting a funding application to the Finance Committee so that the various initiatives can be implemented as soon as possible. So we have 4 members who would like to ask a question. If those who have not raised your hands, please raise your hands now. Let me read out the names. Claudia Mo, followed by Elizabeth QUAT, Ronick Chan, and Mr. Yu Si-wing. Any other members would like to ask a question? Mr. Ma Fong Kwok as well. 4 minutes. Ms. Claudia Mo, you go first. Thank you, Chairman. Basically, I don't object to the funding to be given to Cyberport. I think it's necessary. You said that $100 million will be devoted to promotion of development of esports. As a mom, I have reservations because if you try to discourage your son from playing games too much, then they will say that it's part of esports. And I think it has to do with the moral values in the society, not so much about the technology aspect. What I'm worried more is the mindset of the current government in promoting INT. We've got the impression that on the one hand, you ask Hong Kong talents to go to Shanghai and Bay Area to seek opportunities. And at the same time, you have announced a technology talent admission scheme to import overseas workers. And a pool of labor that you can tap into is the mainland pool. And what is your real thinking? Because these are 2 opposing directions. Because some IT talents think that you are trying to change all the talents here in the IT sector. Well, actually, in the CI panel tomorrow, we will talk about the technology talent admission scheme. So the secretary may say something about this today. Now, for the $100 million is not all for esports. You said that it's $50 million, I understand. Now, for this technology talent admission scheme, it is enhancing the existing admission schemes. There are several major points. We have selected 7 areas. And for these 7 areas, I mean, manpower is in shortage all over Hong Kong, and not just Hong Kong. And the sector has told us that it's very difficult to recruit talents for these 7 sectors. So we have to introduce such talents because we don't have local talents in these 7 areas. And second point, when we do this, we have a talk to the sector. And that is to say, if we help you to bring in the right talents, you must also play your part by grooming local talents. So we have this additional condition, 1+2. And the concept behind is that we don't have certain talents right now. We hope that these enterprises can groom these IT-related talents. So, Secretary, would you be worried that the ratio is still too low? In the first year, we have 1,000 as a quota. This is very much a pilot scheme. And after we do that, we will conduct a review in 6 to 9 months' time to gauge the effectiveness before we decide on the way forward. So all I can say is that these talents are much sought after in Hong Kong, and then we impose an additional condition, and that is the local enterprises have to groom local talents. And then we also, thirdly, we do it by the way of a pilot scheme, and we set the quota here. So I would also like to ask about esports. How do you feel about this? I think this might not be related to INC. And as a member of a family, how do you feel about esports? You talk about adolescents playing too much online games. I think it's not just confined to esports development, because esports is part of a sports activity. It's a competition among people. But if you talk about playing games, is the person against a video game or an online game. I think the merits of promoting this sector outweigh the demerits, as pointed out by yourself. Next one, Dr. Elizabeth QUAT, the Vice Chairman. Thank you, Chairman. So we welcome the government's active efforts in developing IT startups and to provide more support for them and attract overseas enterprises to be stationed in Hong Kong. But for all these support programs of the government, they are focused on the science park and also Cyberport. The sector as a whole is worried because too many resources are just concentrated in Cyberport and science park and their tenants. For some people who have moved out of these institutions, we feel that it's not fair because you can only get the support measures if you are stationed in Cyberport and Science Park, and that's not fair to tenants outside these two institutions. And also for these two establishments, the space is confined. Not everyone can get a space there. Now, you said that you would enhance support for startups, and that also covers outside tenants, including those in the Tsuen Wan Smart Space. That's a good beginning. But I would just talking about this particular location. How are you going to open up the scheme for application from companies not stationed in Cyberport and Science Park so that they can also benefit from the various policies and there would not be any unfair competition?
And having a venue for esports deserves support. I'm also concerned regarding esports, the industry, talent development. How can we provide more support regarding hardware and software? Well, thank you, Chairman. First of all, on the face of it, it looks like we just have Cyberport, but as you said, we are trying to expand the scope to other areas. Cyberport is dedicated. We want to have this incubator idea expand to other areas, and the Cyberport model and Science Park can be deployed in the Loop area as well. So we're not just limited to the Cyberport and Science Park. Now, regarding Cyberport and Science Park, it's been operation for quite a few years. We have some synergies and experience. So based on that, we can roll out further development. On esports, we have said that we don't want all the training in esports to be in Cyberport. It's just being led by Cyberport, and they have a permanent venue for training, but it's not the sole facility. We want to have different participants, and we don't have a lot of networks for esports, so training is also an important part of our policy. So as I explained to Ms. Claudia Mo, a lot of times we do try to support human development. So our Chunwan efforts are also along those lines. As we explained, we do have a pilot program. We're limited to 1,000 immigrants under the immigration scheme, but we're looking at expanding our scope. I'll follow up in the second round, Chairman. We have 3 items we need to exercise time control. Well, Chairman, the government is proposing 100 million on esports. In English, it's called esports. It indicates that it should be a sports event. And 2022, it's going to be an Asian Games event, and we're also seeing that it's pushing to be a part of the Olympic Games. But I don't see that the esports, should it be a sports item or an innovation item? We have Mr. Nicholas Yang, Secretary for Innovation and Technology, helping to present. So should it be considered a sports event or an innovation event? I'd like the government to respond. And the government's thrust into esports and its development of talent. We have the Asian Games that are around the corner in 2022. So is the government dedicated that Hong Kong will have a team present at the Games? Because we don't have a lot of time. We only have 4 years to prepare. How do we train our competitors? So that would be my second question. And the third question is, we have an easy landing scheme where you want to attract anchor tenants from the mainland and overseas. So they will be given a million or 50% rent subsidies. Well, my understanding is $1 million is small change for these companies. So are there any other incentives such as housing, international school placement, and other ancillary services to attract them? Because if we just use $1 million or 50% rent free, I don't think that can attract these, you can achieve your outcome. Well, thank you, Chairman. Well, first of all, esports, it's sports. And our 3 bureau have sat down and considered that, and we finally decided that the Innovation and Technology Bureau would spearhead this item, because it does involve a lot of innovation. So in this respect, we do not mind taking a more leading role. We will also look at how we can cooperate with multinational companies. So you don't need to worry about the division of labor. Regarding the Asian Games, you are correct. We do have a tight time schedule. Hong Kong does have some world-class athletes, and on this occasion, the government has taken the initiative. I noticed that a lot of world-class esports companies are starting to develop an interest in Hong Kong. We understand Mr. Li Ka-shing has invested in Razer, and perhaps Cyberport can also elaborate. So I think the atmosphere is very important as well, because we need an atmosphere, and we need some international events in Hong Kong that can put Hong Kong on the map. Regarding the easy landing scheme, you are correct. 1 million is an incentive, but when two parties, setting aside money, if we want to put something on the table for cooperation, we are not. We are trying to display our sincerity, and Cyberport is also very helpful. We have a lot of startup companies, a lot of the multinational companies. They have an eye on the startup companies. They might want to acquire them, so that is an incentive as well. Mr. Yu Siwen. Thank you, Chairman. I'd like to follow up on the esports development in Hong Kong. Well, we have two 50 millions. One 50 million is for Cyberport venue. My understanding is it's hardware. And regarding software, does that? What about rent and salaries? They will operate for a while. So any profit and loss, how will that be handled? Is the government going to underwrite losses, or will Cyberport underwrite the losses? And if there's a profit, how is that going to be shared? Second question is about the other 50 million. In the future, the Cyberport will develop esports, events, local competitions. Last year, the Tourism Bureau also conducted a competition. There were some gala events. So the Tourism Bureau will promote Hong Kong through esports. So do they need to apply to Cyberport, or is that a separate event and there needs a separate application? So in this respect, will there be a bias to Tourism Bureau, because it does directly support the tourism industry? So is there any priority? Thank you for the question. I want to say that the hardware and software, it's a one-off grant, and the concept is, regarding hardware, we will give the industry a preferential rent arrangement. So the Tourism Bureau, they get money to promote tourism. Now, who's going to underwrite? We have discussed this with the Cyberport. This is just the starting point. We want to provide training venue, some promotion expenses. We had already pledged that, but our goal is not to have Cyberport being the only venue, but when Cyberport continues, we can see when they reach that stage. But in the first 5 years or so, I think after the government has put up the first seed amount, I think Cyberport will understand that they also need to set provisions. So we hope, we want to help them start up, and I don't think there should be any bias towards Tourism Bureau. They have a lot of choices. They are doing tourism. On the last occasion, I felt that they were doing large projects. The Cyberport venue is a small venue, can only entertain 500 people. But the second 50 million is to promote local competitions. It's not limited to Cyberport. Perhaps at Tourism Bureau, they want to host an e-sport event to promote tourism. So the money, is it just limited to Cyberport, or does it any event in Hong Kong, can they make an application to the fund in Cyberport? Well, our current thinking is that it is limited to Cyberport. If you want to deploy it to the rest of Hong Kong, we don't have a permanent venue, and the industry is at the initial point, so we want to focus on Cyberport. So it's just limited to Cyberport. If you're not, if it's not held in Cyberport, you have to make a separate application. No, well, it's just temporarily focused on Cyberport. So in the future, we'll have to see if there can be other arrangements, Mr. Ma Fung Ko. Thank Thank you, Chairman. I have a few questions on esports. First of all, the government had answered that it's a sports event, but also has an electronic part. I represent the sports industry. We have dozens or even more than 100 kind of sports. A lot of these don't even, they receive only a fraction of government support. We have 50 million in venue, 50 million in training. Well, I'd like to ask the government, what's the rationale for supporting this? In principle, I support the event. The second question is about the public engagement. We understand, as the Secretary said, a lot of companies are involved in this industry. It's not just a sports event. As far as I know, there's another company in Cyberport. They want to build an esports center. It's going to be larger than the government. It's also going to commence faster than the government. So your commitment of 50 million, what is your strategy? How do you prevent it being a competitor? You have preferential rent and so on. Will that hinder private investment? The whole esports has a supply chain. The venue is just one aspect. You talked about training. There are also other elements involved. So how will you provide support to guarantee its success? For example, in Korea, they are successful. Some 10 plus years ago, they devised a 5-year plan, and after more than 10 years of work, they are leading this international industry. So I want to ask the government, will you have a similar policy or a sports policy to ensure that within a few years they have some performance indicators to gauge its performance? Well, first of all, the three bureaus had a discussion. Now it is going to be promoted as innovation technology. That was our decision, and subsequently will it be sports and so on? That can be decided in the future. Now, why did we do that? There were two reasons. The first, that was proposed by the industry, and in light of that proposal, we did a consultancy study, and we had then the consultant had canvassed the industry, and the first step is we need to have basic infrastructure. And when you talked about the supply chain, I can tell you there are 38 esports related companies in Cyberport. They are technical companies, and so how are you going to prevent? We are now providing a venue and training, and we are trying to create synergies. This will not compete with the private sector. And we mentioned we don't want Cyberport to be the only facility. It's just that we need to come up with the first venue, and then we can promote the event. Now, the company you referred to, we are very familiar. They had rented a venue of 30,000 feet, and we are able to support them. That's why they are willing to sign that contract.
So my last question, will you map out a development plan for the sector, taking reference from the Korean experience? This is a broader issue. Let's take the first step well and lay a solid foundation for Hong Kong before we think about that. The investment for the sector is going to be huge, and we don't know whether there can be a synergy among the different players, and there will be a market to be created, and we will be competitive. Mr. Christopher Zhang. Thank you, Chairman. I would like to follow up on Mr. Ronick Chan's question. on the Cyberport's Easy Lending program. I think it's worthy of our support. It's a good scheme. But I'm worried. You come up with a certain criteria, and that is it has to be the flagship company of that particular sector. And then it must come with a well-known brand and a good business model with unique business model of a sizable scale. And the concession is $1 million or 50% of the rental. I wonder whether it also includes a residential rental as well. If these three conditions are met, then these companies can easily get listed, and they can generate tens of millions of dollars in the market, and they don't have to come here. Especially in our visit to the Bay Area, we've seen the country giving more substantial support to major players in different sectors, much more than what we are offering here. How can we attract these companies to develop in Hong Kong? Is this just wishful thinking? And we will not be able actually to attract those companies with good capability. Would you consider increasing your support? Say, for example, giving more support in terms of their accommodation here. If people do come, they come with their families. Maybe we can also provide more support in terms of a living space for them, school places for their children, so that they can be attracted to come to Hong Kong to develop. Thank you, Mr. Zhang, for your question. You talk about the listing conditions. Well, companies do gain an advantage by listing in Hong Kong stock market. According to the Hong Kong Excise measures recently announced and the new scheme to be put in place, that would help tech IT companies to come to Hong Kong. Now, as far as whether these are leading companies in their respective sectors, this is still remains a question. Well, they may be our prime target in the future. Well, for those very established companies, they might not find $1 million attractive, and this $1 million doesn't include the accommodation. If we are to also give them the accommodation, then other tenants may complain. I think we have to be fair in how we treat all these different companies. Let me give you a couple of examples on what companies will be attracted to the easy lending scheme. Let me defer to the Cyberport on the recent context with the relevant companies so that you can get an idea of the target groups. Mr. Peter Yan, please. So let me add. Well, Mr. Zhang referred to the leading companies, whether they should be attracted, whether they can be attracted, rather. At Cyberport, we have a certain experience whereby some companies are considered very successful companies in their respective sectors. When they first came here, they were small in scale, but then their scale had multiplied by a few times. For example, there is this company which will start, and for Zhong On, this is a leading company in fintech. They will start their business in May. For these flagship companies, when they come here, they will try to cooperate with startups, and they will have technical exchanges with them so that these startups can also benefit as well. So these are some concrete examples that we have had. Going forward, we are also talking to two similar companies. The member would be very interested in all these examples. Please write to us on the examples, and if we give you the go-ahead today, and then it can get to the FC, the information will help with our assessing the proposal. Next one, Mr. Chen Hanpan. On supporting esports and cyberport, I agree to these proposals. In fact, we are just starting to develop esports in Hong Kong compared to other regions. We are just at a very initial stage. I would like to ask a broader question about your policies. Now, we have the ITB now. We hope that the supply chain can be established. But then for the many government policies, you would just be subsidizing certain sectors or certain institutions like Cyberport, Science Park, and also universities. I mean, only establishments in these few venues will get subsidy. But there are others who are working outside of these establishments, and they've been doing well. They might come up with good products as well. Maybe their products were involved in the incubation program of the Science Park, and they left Science Park later. Now we're talking about $50 billion, and they want to do a lot. But then the government seems to be turning a blind eye to these enterprises. For some enterprises, they have never participated in Science Park programs, and they want support from the government, but the government never pay any regard to them. Well, Secretary, we support your policy, but for these other companies, how are you going to support them? Are you not going to expand the coverage so that enterprises not benefiting from Cyberport, Science Park, and university programs can also be assisted by the government? Secretary, let me share a few statistics with you. Well, maybe, Secretary, just tell me which funds are open to application by the enterprises I mentioned. Please mention some examples. There is this a fund which helps the graduates of Cyberport. That's number one. There are two other platforms, medical technology and AI. There will be a sum of $10 billion for them as well. You may know about this. These two funds are not directly related to Cyberport or Science Park. These are targeted at these two particular sectors. For the Loop Park in Lok Ma Chau, this is not related to Cyberport and Science Park also. In Cyberport, 1,000 companies have been groomed. Half of them are off-site companies. Well, we have a smart space in Tsuen Wan. It's not within Cyberport, right? And we are extending our coverage to Tsuen Wan as well. Well, thank you, Secretary, for trying to answer my question. Let me put a more specific question to you. You talk about Science Park and Cyberport, but some companies have never taken part in any of the programs of Cyberport and Science Park, and how can you make sure that they are assisted by the government? We have the technology voucher, which is not related to Cyberport and Science Park. I am not sure I understand your question. We have got many different funding programs, say the venture fund, etc., which are not related to Cyberport and Science Park, and we're talking about $2 billion there. For the ecosystem chain and so on. We attach a lot of importance to that. We're not just giving them the money to groom the enterprises. We have we will bear in mind how to best develop the overall ecosystem. I believe that the Secretary has heard your views. Next one, Mr. Chan Kim Po. Let me talk first about esports. I agree with Mr. Mo's view, and we should not see it as encouraging young people to play online games. Well, this may not be an appropriate analogy. So, for example, in in a casino, those who win are the casino operators, but the bettors are going to lose. So we don't want the young people to be obsessed and indulge in online games. Well, let's try to encourage the emphasis on the technology aspect. Maybe you should devote more resources to help young people to understand the positioning of esports. This is not equivalent to encouraging people to play online games. I'm very worried because people indulge a lot in online games. My two sons are like playing online games. Well, they have not come to the stage where they will say that this is part of esports. Well, I hope that this kind of concept has to be inculcated into the young people. They have to know exactly what esports is all about. I also support the easy lending scheme. What is the rental rate? You have already used up the space, and how can you have more space? Now you talk about $1 million, and then that means only 10 companies can join the scheme. Well, is it the case that in the future, if needed, more funding will be given to them? Well, is there a vacancy? What is the vacancy rate, and what about the amount? How many enterprises can be supported? Thank you. Well, we attach a lot of importance to the positioning of esports, making sure that it's not equivalent to playing online games. So for the other questions, I'll defer to my colleagues. Maybe Cyberport, the take-up rate of the premises at Cyberport is 97% of the space has been taken up. Not much space then left vacant, according to our plan. When present tenancy agreements expire, and maybe the relevant tenants are not, fit into the category of sectors that we want to develop, we might talk to these tenants, and maybe new tenants can be brought in to take up the space of these existing tenants. So this is number one. Second, as mentioned by the Secretary, apart from the space within the cyber park, say for example in Chunwan, we are also promoting our services there, and we set up we implement a space sharing scheme there. We hope that more startups can be brought in to develop their business, so space can be provided to them. So we will try all ways and means to attract flagship companies and also startups into the sector. So in other words, it's 10 companies or so. Well, that's what I said in the opening speech. As for the eligibility criteria, I think it will be up to the professionals to draw up those criteria. Make sure you pick up the good companies for Hong Kong. It was my turn, and then I will have the vice chairman for the second term. That would be $85 million for enhancing support for startups, and then every year 100 companies will benefit.
So it will be 15 million per year, and 8.5 million. Does that mean that Cyberport will have to chip in? Is that no? 5.5 million is increasing 330,000 to 500,000. That is the government's commitment. So overall speaking, the Cyberport will have to use its resources to handle it. Well, I'd also like to repeat some concerns regarding easy landing. I'm concerned about that because if we really want to have anchor tenants, mainland enterprises, overseas enterprises, then before you go to FC, you need to provide more information, because 1 million or 50% rent subsidy might not be a sufficient incentive. And you also say that there are space constraints in Cyberport. Do you have sufficient space? So a leading multinational, they won't be satisfied with leasing a small office. if they do want to commit to Hong Kong, then we would want them to recruit more personnel. So even Chunwan, is that suitable? Does that satisfy their needs? These companies, they're not just looking at the incentives. You have to tell us what goals or outcomes you're looking at. Well, I mentioned one point, and a lot of these companies, they're willing to come to Cyberport. They might be interested in the startups there because the business model has changed. They might be after some acquisition companies, so they will use these startups to develop their strategy. So that is being pursued by a lot of companies. So we have 2 or 3 minutes. Elizabeth QUAT. Thank you, Chairman. I just want to say, whether it's Cyberport or Science Park, they have contributed to Hong Kong's innovation and technology. We have some management staff who are very familiar with Science Park. You keep committing to Science Park and Cyberport. We want speedy approval of talent coming to Hong Kong. So can we also support companies outside of Cyberport and Science Park, as long as there's a system in place? They can register, they can update you with their developments. So if you have such a big database, then you can even support them. You don't have to say that, oh, they're outside of Cyberport and Science Park, we're not familiar with them, so we cannot extend our support to them. So that might be the case today, but it's going to be just an excuse tomorrow. So both of Cyberport and Science Park are cash rich. Could you set up a special department or a group, a database, to support outside companies? Otherwise, this problem will keep rearing its head. Outside companies will feel that they're being neglected, they are not treated fairly. So that is something the government needs to tackle head on. I agree with what you said. So we will now extend the model to the Loop. We will extend Cyberport model to Chunwan. So we will the space sharing and so on, that will also be implemented. So the first step, we want to have a solid results. So we don't want to take too risky initiatives. Well, if in 3 years' time, when we need to review, well, as I answered Mr. Chan, we are developing the whole ecosystem, not just the Cyberport and Science Park. So whether it's upstream or downstream, we're working with the universities, we're working with SMEs, and we'll continue to do so. Well, the Secretary has understands our concern regarding easy landing, esports, and support to companies outside Cyberport and Science Park. So you have a full plate, and we need to summarize. Do we support the funding to Cyberport and submit that to FC? If there are no questions, we will endorse that. And then thank you. Thank you, Cyberport and Science Park colleagues. Item 4 is the Wi-Fi scheme development, and let's invite another batch of government officials, including Mr. Zhong Wai, Okay, thank you. Dr. David Chung. So once you're seated, you can take us through the latest update on the Wi-Fi, the background brief on development of Wi-Fi connected city. Yes, we are here to update you on the Wi-Fi connected city. In May 2016, the FC had endorsed 500 million to develop the Wi-Fi connected city, and we want to cover increase the scope of Wi-Fi Hong Kong brand. And as of April, the hotspots have exceeded 21,800 hotspots, and we have more than 100 enterprises involved. The venues include parks, leisure, sports centers, the government offices, the self-study rooms, banks, hospitals, shopping malls, restaurants, hotels, convenience stores, and even phone booths and public traffic areas. So we've taken a multi-pronged approach to develop the Wi-Fi connected city. We encourage private-public schemes, and we also have different trial schemes that we started in July last year. So through service providers, we have value-added services as a commercial incentive, and we also have free Wi-Fi in government venues, and the government does not need to foot the bill. And in 26 government hotspots, we have increased the number of Wi-Fi hotspots. Now, through our testing of the sites, and the coverage area is wider than expected, and during the busy periods, the average internet speed is 20 megabits per second, and that is higher than our stated goal. Now, in addition, since we have a lot of hotspots in the venues, so the disconnection rate is low, so therefore we want to extend the coverage of the private-public cooperation scheme. And when we identify more venues, we can provide more service. And we'll also learn from our experience of where the contractual clauses are not very clear. So we have also clarified the obligations and the penalties for non-compliance. These measures also meet the Audit Commission's opinions. So we will extend our 600 government venue Wi-Fi service in the new contract, and we require the operator to deploy new Wi-Fi technology standards, and when feasible, we would like to have fiber replace copper network to enhance stability and speed. So the upgrade will be completed within this year, and we foresee that more than 80% of venues will have a fiber network, and we can increase the speed to 10 megs or above. So regarding the outdoor government venues, at the beginning of this year, we had a trial in 3 parks where we used a mobile Wi-Fi, and we forecast that by June or earlier we'll complete the installation. And if the outcomes are meet our goals, we'll extend that to mini parks in housing estates and sitting out areas. We will continue to use different technological measures to expand our Wi-Fi coverage to satisfy the public's needs for Wi-Fi. At the same time, we'll also ensure that the government resources are used reasonably. So in March last year, in our subsidy scheme, we have approved 51 non-profit organization applications, and in their youth study rooms, we have installed free Wi-Fi, and the relevant scheme in August last year had been rolled out, and currently we have 162 self-study rooms where we provide free Wi-Fi, and it involves more than 700 hotspots. So in order to test the Wi-Fi.HK service quality and whether it meets public expectations. Starting from this year, every year, we will have a performance test and user experience survey. The survey results will be displayed in the Wi-Fi.HK website, and that would conclude my presentation. So we have three colleagues in the queue, Mr. Hui Jifeng, Deputy Chairman, and Hui Jifeng. So if we have another meeting in progress, so if you're interested, you need to queue up. So Hui Jifeng, now we see that the government is expanding its Wi-Fi coverage. That is the appropriate direction, and they also need to commit more resources so public and tourists can benefit. But I see that there are some directions that are not in line with the policy. I see that Telecom Authority, they are reviewing the number of phone booths, and they suggest that public phone booths be reduced. Well, we have more mobile coverage. We don't need to use phone booths, but then a lot of Wi-Fi hotspots would be removed. So in that review, you have not retained Wi-Fi hotspots. There's no policy to retain Wi-Fi hotspots. So when the government is talking about outdoor venues, making it convenient for tourists to use Wi-Fi Hong Kong, we see the phone booths in Central, the Mandarin Oriental. These are very popular tourist spots, and you're removing the Wi-Fi hotspots there. So I'm asking the government, when you promote Wi-Fi Hong Kong, have you taken note of the reduction of phone booth hotspots? So if we don't have a phone booth, you convert it to street lighting. You also have intelligent street lighting. Why do we have these contradictory policies? Could you respond? Well, we note that phone booths are being removed because of usage concerns. So, in light of the reduction, we are looking at how to extend Wi-Fi coverage in those areas. Well, first of all, you have to note the phone booths. There are more than one phone booth in one spot. They're not. They might retain one phone booth, and it was also mentioned that we have intelligent street lighting. So where we have intelligent street lighting, that is also where there's a heavy traffic flow in Central, Admiralty, Causeway Bay. So these street lighting will also provide free Wi-Fi coverage.
In addition, where at locations where there is heavy footfall or in hot tourist spots, we would explore whether more free Wi-Fi hotspots will be provided. The government will do it on our own, and we also will implement the PPC model to provide Wi-Fi hotspots at these places where there is heavy demand for Wi-Fi services. Now, how many telephone booths will be reduced in Hong Kong where the Wi-Fi service will also be removed? Can you also undertake that even if the telephone booths are removed, the Wi-Fi hotspots will still be retained? Or else, I think your policies are contradicting each other. Chairman, if there is indeed a need for that hotspot, we will try our best to identify public facilities in the vicinity to provide such Wi-Fi hotspots, for example, in parks, sitting out areas, and public toilets. And Wi-Fi spots will be provided there. There are two ways of doing it. One is through the PPC model, And say if the private organization doesn't want to pick those locations, then the government will take the initiative to provide such Wi-Fi hotspots. Now, if telephone booths are going to be removed, and if for that location there is indeed a demand for Wi-Fi service, we would definitely retain the Wi-Fi hotspot there. What can I supplement? I think it's a waste of your energy. This is already a Wi-Fi base station there. In Central alone, 20 locations will be removed. Well, you must give us an account on how many locations will be retrofitted with Wi-Fi hotspots after these 20 spots have been removed. Well, I think these is related to the Communications Authority. I think you must say something about how the two different bureaus can interact or cooperate with each other. Now, you said you will use smart lampposts. When will the phone booths be removed, and when will the lampposts be erected? I don't want to see a time gap whereby the services provided are inadequate. And particularly hotspots, you look at the situation. There are some other views that telephone booths should not just be used for providing Wi-Fi service and for some other purposes as well. Maybe in overseas countries, these telephone booths have been turned into kiosks. So please look at this in the context of building a smart city in Hong Kong. So this is my opinion. No need to reply. Dr. Elizabeth QUAT, Vice Chairman. Chairman, I think we are all following up on the same issue. Whenever we talk about Wi-Fi services of the government, I think we are in a predicament. Members of the public have been saying that there aren't enough hotspots and the speed is getting slower and slower. But whereas the government tells us that more hotspots have been established and the speed is getting faster, it seems that we are not in the same Hong Kong. Whatever figures you provide, please make sure that members of the public can use them and find the service convenient and fast. Why don't you make the best use of the 1,000 telephone booths in Hong Kong? Now, this is a difficulty when or bottleneck we face when telephone booths are under the ambit of Communications Authority. Now, every telephone booth now can provide Wi-Fi service. Why can't we convert the telephone booths into some modern facilities as what's being done in other countries? Telephone booths are usually located in convenient locations. They have been retrofitted with telecommunication facilities. Why can't you make use of them to provide Wi-Fi hotspots? Turn them into modern facilities conducive to the development of a smart city. I think the two bureaus have to work together, or else we will find it so weird. On the one hand, you said you don't have enough locations. On the other hand, you are demolishing some useful facilities. Now, in assessing your performance, your own performance, you must heed the public's views, or else people will, or the media will keep on complaining you. There's no point in telling us that you have performed well. Well, Vice Chairman, I think we should be in the same space and time period. Okay, government officers, can you respond? Thank you, Dr. QUAT, and thank you, Chairman. In my opening speech, I said that we would conduct a quantitative and qualitative assessment. This will be a new initiative. We will assess our overall service, and we will also be a survey on users' experience. We will expand our coverage. There are two aspects to the issue. At busy locations, there is indeed coverage already. It's just that at busy locations, can we raise the speed, the connection speed? And in some remote locations, like, for example, in parks, can we use new methods to provide our service? In our last review, we said that there are sports where there is not a heavy footfall, but then people still need to go onto the internet. So we will use a mobile service in parks. There will be a periodic survey on service performance and user experience. In terms of the coverage, in locations like tourist spots and whether there is heavy footfall, we will try to provide high-speed Wi-Fi hotspots. So in these locations, we will adopt new measures to meet service needs. At remote locations and where people do not frequent that much, based on cost consideration, we will provide the service through mobile network. Chairman, I think in the list of outstanding items, I think we should add in the item on telephone booths. Yes, we can add that in. And we will talk to the government to see if that can be discussed. Next one, Mr. Yu Si-wing. The government just said that there are some 20,000 hotspots established already, but people think that the connection speed is too slow and there is no Wi-Fi service at all. Why? Now, if there are a lot of people going online, and then the speed will be lowered. The government has responded by saying that at hotspots, popular destinations, there will be high-speed Wi-Fi hotspots. I agree to that. I think the airport has already done that. In the airport, there is the ordinary connection speed, and for some other areas, there is a high connection speed where people can use the internet or go online for business purpose. I think that's a pragmatic approach. In, say, hot tourist spots, try to establish high-speed connection services. But I don't see that mentioned in the paper. You said that there would be that will be launched early next year. But what locations? Say, for example, in the 10 major tourist spots in Hong Kong, you can tell us how many high-speed connection services spots will be provided, and what is the speed? Well, you must give us a concrete plan. Do you have such a plan? Second, for the high-speed connection points, these are popular hot destination spots. Can you also provide charging facilities? And there should be, say, a QR code displayed so that the tourists will know about their surrounding environment, and they can get a lot more information. Can you talk to the relevant departments so that Hong Kong is really indeed a smart city, a smart tourist city? Can you do that? GCIO, thank you for your question. We talk about the high-speed connection area. We want to implement it as early as possible. You referred to the 10 major tourist destinations. We can talk to the Hong Kong Tourism Board to establish a list of the popular tourist destinations where there is a need to provide such service. We will do that. Now, once we've got the list of these 10 spots, then we can report the same to members here. As for the support measures, we would again talk to the Hong Kong Tourism Board. Assistant GCIO, the member asked about the connection speed. We hope that we can at least achieve 100 Mbps. For these high-speed connection areas, well, we can't allow people to go online and connected indefinitely. Maybe only 5 to 10 people will be allowed to get connected at the same time. And also there will be a limit to the time limit, say 30 minutes for 5 to 10 people. And if you can't get onto the high-speed connection network, what will happen? At the same time, we will be providing connection service at the ordinary speed. You can just use that other network, and you can still go online. Can I ask a further question? This is a good approach. So people would not misunderstand that, well, you can get high-speed connection anywhere, anytime. Well, people and tourists don't understand this. Please come up with a list of 10 top tourist attractions, and then you must do publicity. You must put up some signages, and also on the coverage. Maybe within a radius of 1 kilometer, there will be 2 spots where high-speed connection is available. Then people can look for these spots and then get connected through the high-speed network. Yes, let me supplement. We will do the best publicity work. And in promoting the Wi-Fi.hk brand, we would do that. We have just registered our trademark. We would also promote public-private collaboration. So we will do more publicity. Well, let me follow up with a brief question. For the Wi-Fi.hk registration, I mean, how long will it last? 5 years? I mean, the funding, the earlier funding. It was a 5-year funding. So for this 5-year period, have you reserved resources to enhance the relevant technology? Because technology develops in leaps and bounds. So have you earmarked expenditure for that? Yes. In government venues, well, for hotspots funded by the government, we will work on 2 things. First, all the facilities and equipment will be upgraded to the latest standards 802.11 AC to reduce signal interference and to connect them with the better linkage facilities. And for copper-based network, it will be upgraded to fiber-based network. So for these two new initiatives will enhance the connection speed and reduce the interference of signals. I don't have any further questions. I wonder whether members do have other questions. If not, then we will go to the next agenda item, which is of concern to everyone. Thank you very much. Item 5. The next is subsidy scheme to extend fiber-based networks to village and remote areas. Well, let's welcome first the CEDB and also the AFCA colleagues. They've got a PowerPoint presentation. Let me remind members on the declaration of interest. Because this is a funding application or proposal, according to Rules of Procedures 83A and 84, members, if you have a direct or indirect pecuniary interest in the matters to be discussed, please disclose the nature of that interest before you speak.
So I want to remind legislators who are in other meetings or upstairs, you can participate in this discussion because a lot of legislators would be interested in this item. So I'll have Ms. Eliza Lee take us through this item. Well, you will recall in the policy address last year, the government would take the initiative and provide economic incentives so fixed net operators could extend their fiber optic network to remote areas so villages could benefit from internet access. So after the policy address proposal, in the last 6 months, we have been following up on the content of this subsidy scheme, we did a lot of consultation work. The Secretary had consulted district councils and received widespread welcome. So the Commerce and Economic Development Bureau also visited the district councils and had exchanges with the fixed net operators. So through this dialogue, we would like to come up with an overall subsidy scheme that benefits all the parties. So before I have the PowerPoint presentation from the Office of Communications Authority, I do need to highlight a couple points. We have some 300 remote villages and 170,000 residents. They have no choice in broadband services because they are remote from fiber optic networks. So they can only have the existing copper network to subscribe. And you can imagine the speed is very low. It's less than 10 meg per second. So through the subsidy scheme, what objectives do we wish to achieve? We want to provide economic incentives so the operators can extend the fiber-based network to villages in remote areas, so they can lay the fiber network to these 300 villages. And when they reach, when the fiber reaches those villages, we can connect to the existing copper networks, and internet speed can reach at least 25 megs per second. That means we hope that when the subsidy scheme is rolled out, the 170,000 residents will have a choice from no choice in the past. And we require the winning tender to have 50% of its capacity open to other operators. In other words, when the subsidy scheme is fully implemented, these 170,000 residents will move from zero choice to having a choice, and from having choice to many choices. Because the 50% capacity is provided free to other operators, and the operators through the shared facility can provide services to the villagers. So the whole subsidy scheme is based on providing choice, providing competition, and through competition and choice, we want the 170,000 residents to enjoy urban residents access to high-speed, stable broadband service. And through introducing competition, they can maintain a competitive rate. So fixed net operators are not the only winners. A mobile subscription also enjoy the benefit, because when the bandwidth arrives at the villages, the 4 mobile operators can also lease this fiber network and can provide their mobile mobile service coverage. So the subsidy scheme wants to enhance the telecom infrastructure in remote areas and enhance the quality and reduce prices. That is also a major initiative in preservation and cultural preservation of our remote areas. I note, Chairman, that in the media you have mentioned that we are only spending 750 million of public funds, and we are enhancing the speed from less than 10 meg to at least 25 meg. the criticism was that it's on the low side. But I can confidently tell you that through the tender process, the winning tender will not stop at the minimum threshold. 25 meg per second, that is the basic minimum threshold. If they don't meet that, they cannot tender. But of course, the operators, when they submit tenders, they want to win the tender, and if they want to win the tender, they need to comply with our tender document. So after consulting the villagers and the district council, one important criteria is that the proposed broadband service includes speed, the subscription rates, and other support facilities, such as Wi-Fi services in the previous agenda item. So we are very confident that the tenders, their broadband speed will match the urban speed, and we're talking 500 meg or even 1 gig per second. So of course, if you want to utilize the subsidy scheme to the fullest, and if you want the broadband speed to exceed 25 meg, so when the broadband infrastructure is laid out, they can consider preparation work, and they can reach an agreement with the network operator and enhance their existing copper network to the broadband network. So if the village connection work or enhancement work is in place, so once the broadband arrives, the villagers' broadband will be similar to the urban speed. They can reach 1 gig or even better. So Chairman, that is those are the 2 points I wish to add, and if possible, I'd like to have Ms. Hui from Office of Communications Authority. Ms. Hui? Thank you, Chairman. Just now the Secretary talked about the 2017 CE, said that the broadband needs to be extended to remote areas, and we'd like to implement a subsidy and provide economic incentives to extend the fiber-based network to villages in remote areas. In fact, what benefits do we achieve? Well, as we said just now, in our preliminary estimate, we have 300 villages that don't have fiber network. It will be extended to their villages, and these 300 villages will have 170,000 residents. The internet speed they enjoy now is 10 megabps or lower because they're using copper network. So under our subsidy scheme, if we enhance it to a fiber network, residents can enjoy at least 25 meg broadband service, and we hope that when this is rolled out, then starting from 2021, fiber network can be extended to the villages in phases, and as the Secretary said, we will introduce competition, and residents can have more choice, and there's more price competition. So I'll use this diagram to illustrate the current state of remote villages. The red and blue are the fiber network. The fiber network is parallel to major trunk highways, but when a broadband service is to cover a village, we have to rely on copper at the last mile. We have the connection route. That could be a very long route. We're talking about remote villages, and they are further away from the highway, and this is on government land that is not leased. So that connection will connect to a village network, and that is also a copper network. And in the village, we have private land. We have a network built on private land, and the whole network, including it's based on copper. So the villagers' broadband service is lower than the speed is lower than 10 meg. So in our subsidy scheme, we have a fiber optic network connecting, so from the backbone all the way to the village. The government subsidy will build the fiber network on the unleased government land, and it can serve the villages. So what kind of improvement can we look at? First of all, when the broadband is connected to the village, even though the village network is copper-based, but since we already have fiber optic connected to the village, it can jump from 10 meg to 25 meg. If the village network, if the villagers can reach an agreement with the service provider and enhance their village network to a fiber optic network, then we can even further enhance the service. And we can speed it up some 10 times up to 100 meg or even 1,000 meg. So currently, in the last few months, we have collected a lot of data, and according to the village election rules and the village registration list and information from the fixed net operator, so the information in the whole of NT and outlying islands, we have 750 villages with people living in them, and we know that 450 villages have broadband connected to them. So their speed is at least 25 meg or above. So we have some 300 villages remaining who don't have fiber optic coverage, and they only have 10 meg or lower speed. So these 300 villages, initially we will have 6 projects. They are based on district, so they are represented in different colors on this PowerPoint. On top we have in red the Northern District, where there are 70 villages. The yellow part is in Sai Kung North, and there are 30 villages there. In brown we have Yuen Long, Chun Wan, Kwai Ching, Sa Tin, Dai Bo. There are some 80 villages there. And further down in green, we have Sai Kung, Central Sai Kung and Sha Tin. And in Lama Island, there are some 20 villages. We will build underground network, and the 6th project is in Langtao Island, Chengzhou, Pingzhou. There are some 50 villages, and we will subsidize underground fiber network to Pingzhou and Chengzhou.
Like I said, for these 6 projects, they will be tendered at one go, and eligible fixed network operators, and that is to say local FNOs who have been allowed by the Lands Department to lay fixed networks, can submit tenders. That will be an open tender exercise, and then each location, for each location, FNO will be selected, and it will be the government which is funding the laying of the network. Now, for the successful bidder, it has to lay the optic cables from the roads to the village entrances, and that will also cover 3 submarine cables, including one connecting Lama Island from Hong Kong Island, and from Chengzhou and Pingzhou from Lantau Island. And to introduce competition, the successful bidders will be asked to open up at least half of the capacity of the networks for use by other FNOs for free. Now, selection criteria. The FNOs must meet essential requirements. Say, for example, they must to build new fiber-based networks to designated villages. So the FNOs must promise to connect to all these specified villages, and at least half of the capacity should be opened up for use by other FNOs to introduce competition. And they should meet with the basic essential requirements on the technical side set by the OFCA. Now, then only when they have met all the essential requirements, we will look against at the proposal for a technical assessment. Now, they must bring benefits and convenience to villages, and including whether they can promise that they will be providing higher speed broadband service to villages, and whether they will be providing such services to villages at market rates, and whether at the communal communal areas of the villages, free Wi-Fi service will be provided. And this part will take up at least half of the total scores. And for the third part is the amount of subsidies. As we said, the fund will be around $770 million, and that will be spread across the 6 projects. There will be a cap to be set for each project. When FNOs submit the tenders, the lower the amount they require, the higher the scores they will get. Now, as for timetable, in the first half of 2018, we collected some information. We consulted the various parties. We came up with the specific requirements of the subsidy scheme. So if the ITPB supports this scheme, we will submit a funding application to the FC as soon as we can. If everything goes smoothly, in the latter half of this year, we can prepare the tender documents, hoping that in the first half of next year, there will be a tendering exercise and tenders can be awarded so that the successful bidder can start all the applications for the licenses starting from the second half of 2019. Well, depending on the approval process for the license and also villages' views, the Wi-Fi services can be provided in phases to villages starting 2021. We will continue to monitor the progress of the project. 3 members have raised their hands to ask a question. Maybe in a minute, other members will come in. Elizabeth QUAT, UC Wing, and Mr. Kwok Wai Kang, and Mr. Holden Chow just raised his hand, and Mr. Eddie G. 5 members altogether, 4 minutes each. I'll be very strict on the timing because we can't extend the meeting time. We have to hand over the room to another meeting. Dr. Elizabeth QUAT, the DAB, has been striving for this for many years. It's a long-awaited scheme whereby fiber-based network can be extended to villages and villages can enjoy broadband service. When the government first mentioned this program, they won great applause from the community. But as we get more information, we get worried instead, because for some of the villages, the fiber-based network have got to the village entrances, but then the villages can't benefit because they have to talk to the suppliers on how to get the connection into their own houses because it's costly, and then roads have to be excavated in order to lay the cable. So government departments have to be pulled in to help. Now for Changlan Shun, even if the fiber-based network can get to the village entrances, it doesn't mean the villages can get benefit from the service. Is it a half-hearted initiative? The government seems to be doing something, but I don't think they can get the desired results. The government sets a copper based network is okay, but then that's not what the villagers are asking for. Can the government go the extra mile? And villagers are worried that they don't have much bargaining power when they negotiate with the suppliers, and they lack the money to implement what they want to do. So can the government help them? So I'll be quickly responding, then I will defer to the AFCA. For these 300 villages, remote villages, how come that they don't have high-speed broadband services? Because the trunk fiber networks are too distant away from the villages, and they don't have an economic incentive to do further. So this is a scheme, what the scheme aims to do. So through subsidy, we hope to connect the fiber-based backbone and, well, get the cable extended right to the villages' entrances. But does it mean that we will automatically upgrade the service speed to 25 Mbps, and then we can ignore the individual property owners' wishes and try to connect it to within the village? This is going to be difficult because many different land titles are involved. So what we can do is just to have it connected to the village entrances. That already provides a good economic incentive for the operators to try to clinch a deal with the villages and further upgrade the network within the villages. Well, when we talk about areas inside the villages, land titles are involved. We cannot force people to have the roads excavated and so on. Now, why are we achieving this? Because there is a lack of sort of competition here, and we are asking the operators to free up or make available half of the capacity, and that means there will be competition to be brought in, and we have reason to believe that once there is competition, the FNOs will have a higher economic incentive to provide a service, because right now the economic incentive is not there for them to do better. Maybe they think a copper-based network is good enough. But then when they learn that the 2 or 3 other FNOs will be interested in going into the village, then that will be an economic incentive for them to talk to the villages to try to upgrade the network into a broad-based network. So that's the competition to be introduced there. Well, if it is so attractive, people would already have done it. I am just worried that you are pouring money down the drain. I believe other members will follow up. Mr. Yu Siwing, the administration said that 450 villages have already fiber-based network up to their village entrances, and you are going to work on the remaining 300. Now, on top of that, are there any other villages which are not benefiting? So if that is the case, do you have a timetable to work on these remaining villages as well? And you said that agreement will be signed soon. Some villages may be asking the telecom operators to have the fiber-based network extended to within the villages. Maybe there are only a few households in the village, and the operators are not willing to do it. You said there will be competition. Another operator may be interested. But then this operator will not be interested because there are only too few households. So can you specify in the agreement saying that, for example, if there is a certain number of households in that village, you must have the fiber-based network extended to within the village? Can you specify that in your agreement? Or else some villages will not be able to enjoy the high-speed connection. They will be just sticking to the copper-based network within the villages. Now, you said the agreement will extend to 2021. You will have a tender exercise, and it will be up to the operators to decide how much they spend on laying the fiber-based network. Well, can we ask the government to lay the fiber-based network? That can shorten the timetable. We don't then have to wait till after the tendering exercise, and that means that they will only start laying the network in 2021. Can you not lay the fiber-based network first, and then you can consider the relevant subsidy amount after you've done that? Yes. In the PowerPoint presentation, we said that according to our records, for villages Well, there are a total of 750 villages in remote areas, and there are villages there, and 450 villages are enjoying a 25 Mbps and the connection speed, and the remaining 300 villages are our targets in the subsidy scheme. We mentioned about private land title rights, etc. Well, if you said there's government undertaking the job, it will be the government actually finding the operators to lay the network anyway. So we think that it's better that we tender out the whole thing and then ask the operators to lay the fiber networks, etc., and get it connected to the villages. Well, the government doesn't know how to lay the network ourselves. It will be doing it through the operators. Well, you talked about the excavation permits and other procedures to be gone through if submarine cables are going to be laid. Then after the tendering exercise, the OFCA will help the operators to follow up with the relevant departments. We'll try to help them meet with the statutory requirements as soon as possible, and all the projects can be completed in time, and broadband Wi-Fi services can be provided soonest. While the speed should be at least 25 Mbps, and if 50% of the capacity is freed up, then there is all the economic incentive for the other competitors to provide high-speed broadband service to the 170,000 villages in these villages. We have confidence in that. Well, can you specify in the contract that, say, if a certain number of villages have made the request, then the operators are bound, duty-bound to lay the networks up to the villages? Well, we don't have that plan yet, because private land titles are involved, and we really can't specify the number of households whereby they can request for network to be connected to them. Well, Mr. Kang, the FDU will support this project. And Ms. Alice Mack, in 2015-16, had raised a question asking the government to speed up its work. While you are taking one step forward today, but then many fellow members have asked whether you can go all the way out, through the scheme. You seem to be helping the villages, but then the network is extended only up to the villages' entrances. Are you trying to meet with the anti-competition ordinance by taking that approach, or you are genuine in providing choices to villages? Maybe you want to meet the requirements of the Competition Commission, and you have such requirements. I don't think you are going far enough. And say for the villages, if they are asked to dig deep into their pocket before they have the fiber cables connected to their own houses, then they are not willing to do so. And also, whether the operators have the determination to compete in this market, we don't have to discuss that. I think the government has the answer.
If it was competitive, they would have done so themselves. So the government initiative indicates that it's not competitive. There's now, even if you lay it, the fiber network to the village, there's still no incentive. That's why we say we want a comprehensive solution. If villages want to enjoy fiber optic network, it should be laid right to their doorstep. And even in the urban area, not everybody has a fiber optic network. Even my parents' apartment, they still have to use a phone line. So the fiber optic network, do we have an overall policy such that the operators have some guidelines? Who can answer? Well, just now, we want to encourage competition. That's why we have the subsidy scheme. So where we are using public funds to subsidize the areas where it's not competitive. And if you say that the operators are not interested in providing the service, well, then Office of Communication Authority, their discussions indicate that the operators are interested in submitting a tender. Now, regarding the urban network, the Hong Kong broadband coverage is 91%, and of course there's still 9% that are not covered by fiber optic, and it's similar to the remote villages. These are old buildings. The old buildings, the owners in corporation or the residents, they don't have management. They cannot have an agreement with the network operator to allow them to lay fiber optic in private premises. So the fiber optic network cannot reach these premises, and the director of the Communication Authority has explained why why we can't achieve fiber optic in the last mile, because that is private land. The government cannot require the private landowners to allow an operator lay the fiber network. Mr. Holden Chow. So even though I'm not a member of the ITB panel, I want to ask Chengzhou and Lama Island, the arrangement in the district council had discussed that, because they rely on underground network. So the underground network, when it's laid, the tender winner, they have to deploy 50% to other operators to use for free. So I want to ask, this so-called free capacity, there won't be conditions attached. For example, so the winning tender says they will allow 50% capacity, but if they add conditions, then it ends up where other operators cannot use it. Will they have a monopoly on the Chengzhou and Lama Island market? Can you ensure this so-called free capacity won't come with strings attached? Thank you. Let me clarify. All the winning tenders, whether they lay underground cable or not, they have to make 50% capacity available to other operators. Whether they attach conditions and so on, our director can answer. So when in our tender design, this is a mandatory condition. If they don't meet the condition, we have penalties, such as not giving the subsidy, or will they add extra conditions. The underground cable, the government will subsidize that, but in the daily operations and maintenance, can we share the costs? So we will have to allow that. And of course, if they add unreasonable conditions, in our tender design we can add some penalties. So when we design the whole tender process, we can include these measures. Thank you, Chairman. I think people are concerned that they won't live up to their promise. They will they will bid for the tender and then rule out the competitors. So I think you need to regulate the arrangement. So the subsidy will be granted in phases. So you're not going to give the subsidy in one go. You will dish it out over intervals you can monitor their work. It will, well, when they reach a milestone, we can issue part of the subsidy. And of course, if we notice that, let's say in the technical specifications they made a lot of promises, we need to keep an eye on them, and we have to see whether we can apply penalties in the subsidy. Well, because of time constraint, we have less than 10 minutes, and we still have 2 legislators. I have to exercise strict control, so we might have to keep it Q&A at 3 minutes. Mr. Eddie Chu. Thank you, Chairman. The first question, I see in your timetable that in July 2019 you consult the villagers, and ultimately you don't have a completion date. You might have answered that before. When do we have an estimate for the completion date for projects 1 to 6? And the village, the copper network in the villages, I understand it's controlled by one operator. So in the short term, the 25 meg enhancement, does that mean the operator doesn't have to share the copper network? That's the second question. And third question, the Secretary says that there are private land issues. Well, my understanding is such as sewage, pipes, it's a village facility, the government will resume land. I agree with Ms. Elizabeth QUAT. I have 8 meg service, and it's a monopoly. So even if you reach my village, so if it cannot reach the doorstep, can you consider resuming land as you would do for sewage pipes? Well, the government needs the legal authority. Under our telecoms authority, the government does not have any authority to mandatory resume land or disclose or make the building available to telecom operators. Well, there was a statement that the copper network belongs to an operator. Well, I think that just covers the route from the trunk to the village, and because of that we have the subsidy scheme. We need to enhance the broadband and the fiber network from the trunk all the way to the village. So you can immediately increase the speed to 25. You can increase it to 25 meg. But of course, if you don't understand the question, operator A controls the copper network. They won't allow B to provide the 25 meg service. Once it's connected, they can immediately. Well, they can. Then, if you're using 8 meg, the next day you can enjoy 25 meg. If I want to use the second operator, there's an interconnection requirement. So we can explain to Mr. Eddie Chu in a separate discussion. Well, in the October 2017 information, the coverage was 92.8%, but the broadband fiber net coverage is 71%. So once we implement the subsidy, so how much coverage can you provide? Does the government have the figures? And for the remainder that cannot enjoy that, does the government have any measures to ensure that as many residents as possible can enjoy this broadband? Well, the general explanation is that the broadband coverage, we already have quite a high level. It's 91.2% broadband. So the households that don't enjoy the service, there are many reasons. We see in the urban area, they are old buildings. They don't have owners in corporation, or they don't have a group of owner representatives to negotiate with the operators. The broadband already reaches the street level, but they don't have a commercial arrangement. They cannot allow the operator, the authority, to enter the building or enter the residents' premises. That is the reason why broadband cannot reach the residential unit. So even with the different subsidies, even in the urban area and in the rural and remote areas, the situation is even worse. The operators, fiber trunk, and the villages are too remote. They have to rely on copper network. So the subsidy is trying to remove this economic obstacle and provide the connection from the trunk to the village. So the fiber optic network can connect directly to the copper network in the village, and the speed can immediately raise to 25 megs. So by using this scheme, we can enjoy 25. So from the current less than 10 meg per second, they can immediately increase it to 25. No, it's immediate. Regardless, even with the copper network, as Chairman said, there's an interconnection. Through the interconnection, they can reach 25 meg. But if the residents want to reach urban levels, 100 meg or 1,000 meg, then within the village, they need to enhance it to a fiber optic network. Well, I think the Communication Authority and Commerce Economic Development Bureau have heard their concerns about speed and the last mile in the villages. You need to have legislators and the public believe that there's competition. I have just a single provider in the urban area, and their fiber optic package costs a few $1,000s, and if a second competitor enters, the second competitor requires a subscriber base before they can provide service in our building. So that is not the last mile. So when it reaches the village, the other operator might have their own requirements. So you need to consider, after reaching the village, how to facilitate the villagers or the second operator, other operators. They need to provide the last mile and provide the interconnection, and if they want a higher speed fiber optic network in the village, so aside from the basic requirement, you need to do more, and because of time constraints, I might not be able to give you time to respond. Thank you we heard your comments. So in the whole subsidy scheme tender, the the Communication Authority can enhance the copper network to fiber network, and in the tender and in the construction phase, there's a lot of room for us to do our work. So if members don't have questions, can we support this item in principle and submit it to the FC, or is it to PWSC? So if there's no objection, we support this item. And we don't have AOB. Next meeting is on 11th of June. Meeting adjourned.